A notebook forgotten in a cold bank room awakens buried memories and reveals unexpected ties between two men marked by war. The encounter transforms not only a lone request, but also the course of broken lives in search of purpose and redemption. The sun was beating down on the city's asphalt when Marcus Lee parked his old Chevrolet in front of the Bank of America Trust. He adjusted his worn-out tie, a gift from his parents when he returned from the war, and took a deep breath. The synthetic leather folder contained all the loan documents he needed to fulfill his dream. An auto repair shop that would serve as a vocational school for the young people in his neighborhood. Marcus, at 42, carried both visible and invisible marks of a soldier on his body. A scar ran along his right forearm, a reminder of a grenade shard. But the internal wounds, those no one could see, were deeper. Sleep interrupted by nightmares, cold sweat in the early hours, and being startled by fireworks were constant companions. Before getting out of the car, he opened the glove compartment and took out his leather notebook. It was battered, with stains that told stories he preferred to forget. He flipped through a few pages, running his fingers over the shaky writing made in moments of desperation and hope. It was his talisman, his silent confidant from wartime. He tucked it into the inner pocket of his jacket and got out of the car. The contrast between the suffocating heat of the street and the icy air conditioning of the bank made his skin shiver. The spacious hall, with its marble floors and fine wooden counters, was intimidating. Some people observed him discreetly, as if questioning his presence in that environment. Marcus was used to those looks. After 3 tours in Afghanistan, defending a country that often treated him as a second-class citizen, he had learned to keep his head held high. "Good morning. I would like to speak with the manager about a small business loan," he said to the receptionist, who examined him for a few seconds before responding. "Mr. Adams is available, 3rd room on the right." Marcus walked down the corridor, feeling the weight of every step. The name on the golden sign on the door said Richard Adams, Business Relationship Manager. He knocked and heard a dry and authoritative "Come in." Richard Adams was the personification of the banking system. Perfectly groomed gray hair, an impeccable suit, and a Rolex on his wrist that probably cost more than Marcus's car. At 50 years old, he had built a solid career based on calculated decisions and a pragmatic view of money and risk. "How can I help you?" he asked, without getting up or extending his hand. "Good morning, Mr. Adams. I am Marcus Lee. I came to discuss my loan application to open a mechanic shop." The banker indicated the chair in front of him with a nonchalant gesture. "I am familiar with your request. I read the material you sent beforehand." Richard's cold tone didn't surprise Marcus. For the next few minutes, he passionately explained his project. A workshop that would not only repair cars but also train neighborhood youths, offering them a profession and keeping them off the streets. "I was a mechanic in the Army, worked with all kinds of vehicles under extreme conditions. I know how to turn a broken engine into something useful again. That's what I want to do with these kids," he explained, with the gleam in his eyes of someone who truly believes in what he says. Richard listened with a neutral expression, drumming his fingers on the mahogany table. Marcus talked about his business plan, the revenue projections, the space he had already found to rent. He mentioned his modest savings, insufficient to start the business but proof of his commitment. When Marcus finished, there was an awkward silence. Richard adjusted his silk tie and leaned forward. "Mr. Lee, unfortunately, the bank cannot approve your request," he said with professional coldness. "Your credit history is limited. You do not have sufficient collateral, and the business plan poses considerable risks for our institution." The words fell like stones on Marcus. It wasn't the first time he had heard a no, but each refusal weighed heavier than the last. "Mr. Adams, I understand your concerns, but I believe my military and technical experience makes up for. Our decisions are based on numbers, Mr. Lee, not personal stories," Richard interrupted. "If there's nothing more to discuss." Marcus felt the heat rise to his face. It was humiliation mixed with restrained anger. He gathered his documents with dignity, carefully placing them in his briefcase. As he stood up, he did not notice his old notebook slipping from the inner pocket of his jacket, silently falling to the floor. "Thank you for your time," Marcus said, with the controlled voice of someone who had learned to swallow disappointments. He was almost at the door when Richard noticed the object on the floor. "Wait, you dropped something." The banker picked up the notebook and reflexively opened it before handing it over. His eyes caught sight of sentences written in irregular handwriting, brownish-red stains on the edges of the pages. Something about that object intrigued him. It wasn't a common notebook. "Is this yours?" he asked, still leafing through it slowly. Marcus turned, feeling a tightness in his chest upon seeing his treasure in a stranger's hands. "Yes, it's personal." Richard continued examining the pages. A phrase caught his eye. "Lord, guard my life and the lives of my brothers. Do not abandon us in this valley of shadows." "These stains, are they blood?" he asked, suddenly less professional, more human. Marcus nodded, reluctant to share that part of his life. "I was in Afghanistan, 3 tours. The notebook accompanied me on all of them." Something in the room's atmosphere changed. Richard continued flipping through the pages, now with genuine curiosity. They were prayers, reflections, short accounts of difficult days, names of comrades, dates, locations. Then his entire body froze. On a page dated March 14, 2007, it was written, "Today we lost Johnson and Ramirez. Michael Adams is fighting for his life. He lost a lot of blood, but I managed to drag him to the shelter. I keep praying." Richard turned pale, his fingers clutching the edges of the notebook so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Michael Adams." His voice came out as a whisper. Marcus frowned, confused by the banker's reaction. "Yes, he was a young lieutenant, very brave." Richard stood up, his legs trembling slightly. "Michael was my younger brother," he said, the words coming out with difficulty. "He died in Afghanistan 12 years ago." A heavy silence filled the room. Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. Of all the possibilities, he never imagined he would be face to face with Michael's brother. I was with him," Marcus confirmed, his voice choked with sudden emotion. "We served together for almost 6 months." Richard flipped through a few more pages, finding more references to his brother. There were accounts of conversations, shared moments, even jokes. Michael Adams came to life in those pages, preserved by ink and paper. "No one ever told us exactly how it was," Richard murmured, sitting down again, this time defeated by the weight of the memories. "Only that he died in combat." Marcus took a deep breath. The memories he tried to keep contained overflowed. "We were on patrol near Kandahar. An ambush. Michael was hit while protecting a civilian. I managed to drag him to shelter, but the wound was too severe." Richard turned a few more pages with trembling fingers until he found the final entry about his brother. "Michael passed away at 3:42 a.m. His last words were for his brother Richard. He said, 'Tell him to find peace in God, to live a worthy life as he always told me.' I promised that if I came back, I would try to find this Richard to pass on the message. Today we bury another hero whom the world will forget." The banker let out a stifled sob, closing his eyes for a moment. When he reopened them, they were moist. "You never fulfilled your promise," he said, without accusation in his voice. "I tried," Marcus replied sincerely. "I looked for Richard Adams, but there are so many. I sent some letters, called numbers I got, but never received a response. After a while, life goes on," Richard completed. "And we just move forward." He continued leafing through the notebook, now with reverence. Each page was a testimony of horror and hope, of loss and faith. It was the war scene through the eyes of someone who was there, not through the sanitized lenses of the news. "Michael and I were close when we were children," Richard said, looking at a framed photo on his desk that Marcus hadn't noticed before. "But we drifted apart in adulthood. He chose the military, I the world of finance. Our worldviews were different. Marcus nodded, remembering the stories Michael used to tell about his older brother. He talked about you. He used to say you were brilliant but too tied to what you could touch and count. He thought you had forgotten to look up at the sky. Richard laughed, a sad and nostalgic laugh. Sounds like something he would say. Michael was always the dreamer of the family. I was the practical one. A comfortable silence settled between the two men, united by the memory of someone they both knew in different ways. Richard looked at the folder of documents that Marcus was still holding. "Why a mechanic workshop?" he asked, genuinely interested. Marcus sat down again, feeling that something fundamental had shifted in that room. "In the army, I learned that fixing things gives purpose. A broken vehicle can mean life or death. I learned to value working with my hands and the satisfaction of making something work again." He paused, choosing his words. "But it's more than that. In my neighborhood, I see boys without direction, without purpose. Some of them have given up before they even started. I want to show them that they can build something, that their hands can create instead of destroy." Richard listened intently, seeing Marcus in a new light. Michael used to say something similar. He believed that everyone deserved a second chance. The banker remained silent for a few moments, as if waging an internal battle. Then, he reached out for the document folder. "May I see your business plan again?" During the next hour, Richard examined every detail of Marcus's project. He asked specific questions, suggested adjustments, questioned projections. He was no longer the cold banker rejecting a client. He was an engaged professional seeking solutions. "Your plan has merit," Richard concluded, "but we need to strengthen some points to ensure its approval." Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Are you saying you're going to reconsider my request?" Richard shook his head. "I'm saying I'm going to approve your loan," he corrected. "And more than that, I want to get personally involved in the project." He stood up and walked to the window, gazing at the city outside. "You know, ever since I lost Michael, I've just been existing. I work, come home, work again. My wife says I've become a machine." He turned to Marcus. "Maybe it's time to look at the sky again." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. "Mr. Adams, Richard," the banker corrected. "I think we're beyond formalities now." "Richard," Marcus smiled. "I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, just make it worth it. Not just for the money, but for Michael, for those kids, for yourself." Richard returned the notebook to Marcus, who carefully put it back in his pocket. "This notebook saved more than memories today," the banker noted. "Maybe it was Michael, working in ways we don't understand," Marcus replied. Richard smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "That sounds like something he would say." 6 months later, the New Beginning workshop opened its doors. The renovated warehouse gleamed with new equipment and motivational posters. On the first day, 10 young people from the neighborhood showed up for the apprenticeship program. Marcus, wearing a clean overall with the workshop's logo, watched proudly as the young men explored the space. Richard, without a suit for the first time in years, stood by his side. "Michael would be proud," said the banker, now a partner and friend. Marcus nodded, looking at a discreet plaque on the wall that read, "In memory of Lieutenant Michael Adams, because everyone deserves a second chance." "You know what's amazing?" Marcus commented. "How something as terrible as war could, years later, create something so good." Richard put his hand on his friend's shoulder. "It's like you said about engines. Sometimes things break so that we can rebuild them, better than before." As the young apprentices gathered for their first class, Marcus felt a peace he hadn't experienced since before the war. His notebook, now stored in a special box in his office, had completed its mission. Michael's message had finally reached its recipient. And somehow, 2 lives broken by war found healing through a shared purpose, a bridge built over the chasm of loss, connecting past and future, pain and hope, death and rebirth.